Hello everybody. Now many of us sow seeds or grow roots and tubers to grow our own plants, but how many of us grow our own plants to make our own feed, to feed the plants that we're growing? Well, I can answer that roughly. This site has about 40, maybe 50 plots on it, and I think I'm the only person on this site that does it, so it does tell you that not many people do it, and I think people are missing out. Now, even farmers practice this when they let fields go fallow for a year in a crop rotation of a few fields. They just won't grow crops in it that year, but it is growing a crop, it's growing a grass crop, which they'll later plough in to feed the soil for the crop they're growing the year after. So it's not something new. It's been going on for centuries. People have been making feed for plants. I mean, I know of one quite famous one. People will get generally a pair of tights, fill it with sheep poo or cow poo, and just hang it, suspend it in a barrel of water, and that will make a brilliant feed for your tomatoes and your dahlias and those sort of things. And I know for a fact that the Americans have been very big on compost tea, which again is a barrel of water with a couple of shovelfuls of compost in it, some molasses, and then they aerate that and make this beautiful compost tea to feed their plants. It's nothing new. So why aren't more people doing it? Simple answer is I don't know, and if you're not doing it, then you can probably answer that for me and write it in the comments below. That would be wonderful. That would be really interesting. The only thing I can really think of is that people may think it's a bit of a faff to do. It's a lot of messing around, when in all reality it's nothing more difficult than cutting some plants up, putting them in a barrel of water and leaving them to steep for 3 or 4 weeks, and your plant food's ready. It's just the same as going to a local supermarket and buying a bottle of tomato food, which will cost you 3 or 4 quid for a bottle, whereas your plant food costs you nothing. And it's there on your plot, and it's organic. You've made it yourself. You know what's in it. There are no added chemicals or added this. It's just plain out and out good food. Now, from my own tests over the years, I know that my Comfrey feed far outperforms the standard big brand tomato foods. I've also seen that tests done on a gardening program here in the UK, up in Scotland, where again it outperformed the leading brand of tomato food. And I've also seen anecdotal evidence online from the Permaculture Society, who also pretty much say the same thing. So why aren't more people growing Comfrey and making plant food from it? But again, it's not the only plant you can make food from. Now, this is my Comfrey patch, and it's grown under the shade of this tree where not much else will grow. I could grow other stuff here, but I've chosen to grow the Comfrey. Now, Comfrey is known as a bio-accumulator, and what that is because its roots go down so deep, 3 to 4 meters in some cases, it can access nutrients that's in the soil or in the ground underneath, and trace elements and things, draw them up through its roots and fetch them and leave them in these leaves. And that's why this stuff is like gold dust for you. And all you need to do with this stuff is cut it off sort of 3 or 4 inches above the ground, and then it will regrow. I'll get 3, possibly 4 harvests on a good year, 5 of this height once they're up to flowering height. And I just keep shoving it in a barrel and getting extra feed, just steep it for about 4 or 5 weeks, and then you drain off the liquid. The sludge can go in your compost heap, and it will help speed up that composting process as well. Now, you can use compost in so many ways. You can mix the chopped and bruised leaves up with grass clippings and use it as a mulch to help stop weeds growing on your soil, and to also break down and then feed your plants. You can layer this stuff lasagna style in a compost heap, as I said earlier, to help heat that up. You can put it at the bottom of your potato trench or your runner bean trenches, and it will help there as well. You can even compress this stuff and just get the pure liquid out of it, but I don't do that. You can get a sort of a big waste pipe and continually fill it and put a big heavy weight on it. As long as you've got a tap at the bottom, you can draw the liquid off. You'll get a very thick, viscous sort of brown black liquid out of it, which you then later water down to use. I don't bother with that. It's too much of a faff filling up a big pipe like that, I just steep it all in a barrel of water and draw the water off and use that. Now, the other good thing is these flowers, bees love them. There aren't many around today while it's windy and not so very sunny, but say during the summer, and there's one here now, the bees absolutely adore this. And the thing is with the nectar in these flowers is they regenerate really quickly. I believe it's about every 20 minutes, whereas most flowers can be 6 hours. Most flowers can be 6 hours to well over a day to regenerate that. So these are incredibly good for the local wildlife as well. And what I'll tend to do is I'll cut half of this patch down over the next few days and make a feed, and I'll leave them flowering, and then 2 or 3 weeks later I'll cut the rest down as the rest are nearly there at flowering. Now, when it comes to watering down the liquid that you get from this is where opinion varies. I've seen people using it where it's almost black, and to me that's too strong. Doesn't mean that they're wrong, it's just too strong from the way I like to use it. I always think of the colour of a cup of tea before you put the milk in, and that's the colour I want to use my feed from when I'm feeding plants direct. But I also use it slightly differently. For instance, when I've my tomatoes in the polytunnel, I prefer to water them most days, and my theory is that for 3 or 4 days I'm watering, not giving them any feed, and then I'm giving them feed once, maybe twice a week. Can you imagine just living on liquids for 3 or 4 days with no food? That's my theory and that's my analogy. So I will feed every time I water my tomatoes, every single time, but with a much reduced feed. The water is barely coloured. You can barely see that it's different than water. So every time they're getting food and water, and that's my theory and how I do that with my tomatoes. So in the polytunnel, the water butt I keep in there, which I keep it in there to keep it at the same temperature as the plants, keep the water the same temperature, and it's always got feed in from now onwards all the way through till the end of the season, sort of in September time. So I'm constantly topping that up with water in the polytunnel and then adding more feed to make sure that my plants are always getting it. That's just a little tip from me. Now, Comfrey is at its best, I feel, for fruiting and flowering plants, hence why I use it on my tomatoes. And for flowers like this. And I'm just in the process of clearing this bed out. It's got full of weed and I've got a whole barrow full of it there, but don't need to waste that. You don't need to just throw it away and compost it. You can make a flower feed. You can make a feed from any green material you're throwing away, whether that's grass clippings, weeds, plant trimmings. Just blanch it in water, just pop it in the water, not blanch it, and let it steep for a while and sieve it and use that resultant liquid to feed your plants with. It doesn't get simpler. I mean, the very popular one, of course, is nettle feed, which is very high in nitrogen. So you use that on your plants the early time of the year to get things powering away. Like I would use it on this lupin here to get that powering away. Now that it's flowering, I'll use Comfrey feed on it, change the feeds over. So don't waste these things, make it's all for free. Now, I also have a couple of fires here a year just to get rid of old stuff, old dead and disease dying material or bits of wood and that, but I'll make sure A, it's not treated with any chemicals and there's no plastics in there, that sort of thing. Then all the wood ash, store, keep that gets fed into the Comfrey patch. And also the last harvest of the year, the last hurrah, when it's up here and it's flowering, I won't pick that. I'll let that die back down to feed the plant further. So Comfrey needs feeding as well. So just to recap, if you're going to get Comfrey, get the Bocking 14. Definitely don't get one that you don't know its origin. Make sure it is the Bocking 14 that you're going to plant. And if you're growing it in pots to start them off, don't put them in any soil where you don't want it to grow, because it will very quickly get out of that plot and into your ground. It will grow in shade, and so it's suited for those areas that you can't produce anything from anyway. Like mine's underneath that tree at the back there, perfect spot for it. And that's it really. And I've got free plant food from that and from the nettles that I also allowed to grow at the back. I've got a big patch of them over in the other corner, and I cut that down periodically and make a nettle feed from that. And I also make a general purpose weed feed as well. As long as everything's sieved, you're not putting seeds back onto your soil, and you're not spreading weeds. And if you're careful, you can use the sludge, certainly of the Comfrey, on your compost heap. Don't put the nettle or the weed sludge on your Comfrey, put that in a separate pile. But that's for another day, that talk. So I hope you all gained something from that, learned something, and consider growing your own feed. You'll save yourself a pile of money, and you'll know exactly what you're putting back on your plants. There'll be no chemicals in the bottles that you don't know about, 100% organic, and you'll be doing yourself good, i.e. in the pocket, and you're doing your plants good by giving them something natural. But that's it for today. Look after yourselves, everyone. Please stay safe, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Ta-ra now.